Sandy beaches and a tropical climate, one-of-a-kind ecosystems including coral reefs and the Everglades marshes. All these describe Miami's natural environment and are just some of what makes it the unique treasure it is today. Locals and visitors from all over the world benefit from and enjoy these treasures. But sadly, an increasing population, pollution, and the impacts of climate change all pose great threats to Miami's natural wonders. This season of Beyond Vizcaya, we will explore the area's resiliency in the face of environmental challenges. We will learn more about how this impacts the people in our community through shared stories. We will take a closer look at how landscapes have been affected and hear just how technology and innovation have been used to meet the challenges the city faces. You will also have the chance to chime in on the conversation by sharing your own experiences or asking questions. Join us as we seek to learn more about how to keep our natural environment alive on this season of Beyond Vizcaya. Hello everyone, and welcome to another live stream edition of Beyond Vizcaya. My name is Oldine Monestime and I will be your host for today's program. If you don't already know, Beyond Vizcaya is a community storytelling platform that tells the stories of those that live or grew up in Miami. In our first season, we focused on themes such as labor, migration, and cultural identity. This season, we focus on climate change and the natural environment. Now, we are currently recording live from Vizcaya's courtyard. Vizcaya's main house was completed in 1916 and was once the home of Chicago businessman James Deering. Our program today discusses the impacts of climate change and the access issues that have been created as a result. Now, during the early 1900s, there were various factors limiting access to certain things. These factors included distance and lack of transportation. For example, if you wanted to enjoy certain foods during Mr. Deering's time, your access to them was limited by your location and how effectively trains or boats could get shipments to your area. In the present day, climate change has created different access issues. Today we have with us three very special guests, and we're here to take part in a conversation surrounding climate change. This particular conversation will help bring in the understanding that climate change affects us all, despite where we live or our socioeconomic status. I want to introduce to everyone Sarah Curry, who is a seafood educator, Leonie Hermantin, a director at a local Miami community center, and Joanne Perodin, who specializes in and researches various matters pertaining to climate. Thank you all for being with us today. All right, and I want to start with you, Sarah.
All right.
How are you?
Good. Thanks for having me. Great to be here.
And you're the founder of Sereia Films, and you use this platform of film to educate consumers so that we can make smarter seafood choices. I think that's amazing. From your website, it reads, "Our oceans are running out of fish, and we need to make smarter seafood choices to ensure there are fish in the ocean for future generations." Now, some people may not immediately understand how seafood options connect to climate change. However, we do know that climate change can have a negative impact on our natural ecosystems like our oceans. Can you kind of start by explaining to us why seafood education is important and how that connects to climate change?
Sure. Yeah, so our oceans historically have been very abundant, and as our population has grown, we've been depleting those resources a bit. We also farm about currently half of the seafood that we eat globally. And so I think in general there's a disconnect often with our food systems, and seafood is just one part of that. And so when you bring climate change into it, it gets pretty interesting too, because seafood compared to other protein sources can be a really kind of good choice for climate. Because if you think about it, particularly with like wild fisheries, you're not feeding them or providing land for, like, say, a cow or a chicken, and so those fish have a lower carbon footprint than some other proteins. So that's really awesome. And then with some farm seafoods, they actually provide ecosystem benefits. So we have oyster farms. And oysters in general are really amazing kind of protective reefs for our coastlines, and they've been in decline globally. So most of the oysters that we eat globally are farmed, about 95% of them, and they're still providing some of those ecosystem benefits with like the cages themselves. But they're also filter feeders. They filter about 50 gallons of water a day. So they're eating a little algae from the water. And there's a big kind of focus these days on blue foods, and so that encompasses both the wild and farm seafood, and kind of leaning into how we can grow more sustainable food and help the environment and get some healthy protein for ourselves too.
And so now that we've learned a little bit about what some climate-friendly food could consist of, we know that sometimes there may be challenges, right, with maybe getting to those foods or accessing those foods. Can you kind of speak to that?
Sure. A lot of the seafood, most of the seafood consumed in the United States and here in Florida is imported, between 70 and 90%. And that became, I was thinking about that a lot during COVID as our supply chains got disrupted and it was hard to get stuff. And so I worked with an amazing intern to create these maps of farms here in Florida, and to just kind of show people that we in fact grow a lot of seafood here. And then I started kind of reaching out to farms and talking to farms, and a lot of the work I do with the films is going to visit a seafood producer and then following that product to the end user. And so I film a clam farm in South Tampa Bay and screen it here in Miami, and the people are like, oh, where can I get that clam, you know? And then you start to realize, okay, they're small, they don't quite get down this far, but what is offered here? And you start to learn kind of the issues within distribution, and some of that is, you know, where the farmers can get the most for their product. So like for tilapia, for example, we have a lot of amazing tilapia farms right down here in Homestead, but a lot of those are sold into the live market, maybe up near Orlando, because they can't really compete price-wise with a lot of frozen tilapia that's imported. So there's access in those ways, and there's also like cost barriers often. Seafood can be really expensive. And on the one hand, some of this more sustainable seafood, I mean, a lot of work goes into whether you're catching it or farming it, processing it, getting it to the end person, and if you're feeding the fish, like what goes into that. So there's just all these steps in the process, but it can be cost prohibitive sometimes. And so how do we address that? And that's another big access issue that I'm really interested in kind of continuing to learn about.
I think it's great that you have this platform of film that can reach so many with educating everyone on that. So as you research, you can continue to share that wealth of information. So thank you for that.
Yeah.
And I just kind of want us to maybe take a look at the meaning of access. When we look at it from the perspective of it being a noun, it's this ability or the right. And then we look at it from the standpoint of it being a verb, it's to be able to reach or to approach. And so this kind of makes me want to go ahead and just shift a little bit to our next guest, Leonie. So first and foremost, thank you very much for being with us today. Happy to have you. And then you currently serve as the Director of Development and Communications and Strategic Planning at Sant La Haitian Neighborhood Center. And we're seeing a little bit of video on that. Sant La's mission is to empower, strengthen, and uplift South Florida's Haitian community by providing free access to information and existing services to ensure its successful integration. And Miami-Dade County alone has one of the largest concentrations of Haitians in South Florida in the United States. So thank you for the services that the center provides.
Thank you.
And I want to focus on the last part of the mission, where it explains how you fulfill it. It says, you know, you're providing free access to information and existing services to ensure successful integration. We just talked about this whole theme of access with Sarah. And so my first question for you, as it pertains to climate change and Sant La, how is it that you all go about providing residents, community members with essential information?
Well, we definitely identify some of the most cost-effective and communication-wise effective ways to reach the community. This is a community that's considered hard to reach by most because it does not get its information through the traditional channels. And so because of language issues, because of culture issues, because sometimes the information may be available, but it needs to be delivered by a trusted messenger for it to be acted upon. And so, the idea of access to our community is both providing culturally sensitive, providing the information in a way that is culturally relevant and sensitive, the channels that people access, so be it radio, be it Haitian television, be it WhatsApp, be it Facebook, but also more importantly the trusted messenger. And so it takes us again to the faith-based spheres, because people trust their pastors, people trust their church members, people trust some elected officials, some community leaders. And so it's this sort of constantly finding where to bring the information and who should deliver the information. And that can get a little complicated and costly sometimes.
In a separate conversation that we had, you mentioned how one example would be hurricane preparedness, in terms of educating different community members. What would that look like in terms of sharing information about hurricane preparedness?
Well, hurricane preparedness, we have radio partners. We have members of the media who understand the importance, because Haitian media is very small and you have to pay, in order to share the information. Sometimes you have to pay for access, and so with limited resources, you have to create relationships with some key media people to say, can you give me 5 minutes? And so that 5 minutes is used to say, hurricane season is coming, this is important, you need to, and so you sort of give bring the information incrementally about be prepared. If you have some elderly people, first thing is register them at the county. So that's number one. Do you know where your shelters are? I mean, we'll talk later about the surveys that we've done, but the information is provided, as I said, via radio, WhatsApp. We record messages and share them and hope that they go viral. And then Facebook, every means possible. Churches, when we can, we go to churches, set up a table and talk about hurricane preparedness. We distribute kits, especially for the elderly. We partner with anybody who wants to partner with us to provide information, supplies, etc. So it concentrates, it starts around June, but we really work on it kind of year-round to educate.
And I know another part of your mission and some of what it is that the center focuses on is this idea of becoming self-sufficient. So sometimes it's on us to be able to make sure that we remain aware. How is that addressed at the center?
Well, yeah, self-sufficiency is, since you know that with limited resources, you're not going to be able to empty out the supermarket the day before the hurricane, then start incrementally. And we'll tell people, when you go out and do some food shopping, get a couple of things year-round so that you have your reserve and you're not caught panicking when the time comes. Because there's nothing worse than going to the supermarket and seeing everybody coming out with cart loads of food and you can't afford it. I mean, I've been to supermarkets before hurricanes, and sometimes I've seen people just come out with water because that's all they could afford. And so, we tell people we're not going to be able to give you all the canned goods that you can. That's not sustainable. And so preparation is the way to be sustainable and to deal with the hurricane with dignity. And so that's, you know, because what also undergoes what we do is to encourage people to deal with their situation with dignity. So you don't have to go fight for food, you know, just buy it incrementally, get a couple of cans of tuna, a couple of cans of, you know, whatever you need, milk, you know, canned milk and all of that, because you're going to need, and make sure you don't eat it. So you know, that's how we deal with the sustainability, and we continue to inform partners about these issues. We keep saying that the needs are different, and they're not unique to our community. There are many other communities that are hardworking people but cash poor, and you know, cannot afford to panic like we do, you know, panic buying as we do, and it's stressful when you see others, you know, empty out the shelves and you can only afford water. It's very stressful. It's traumatic for some.
Right, right. And that kind of brings us to our next point. You just talked about how, depending on the community, some might be impacted more than others. But still, in one way or another, we are all affected. Mm-hmm. It just really all depends. So this brings me to you, Joanne. I know you've done a lot of research in the area of climate change and this whole term of climate justice. So just want to share a little bit about who you are and what you bring to this discussion. First, I want to welcome you and thank you for being here with us.
Thank you.
You're the co-founder of the Optima network. And as we're seeing right now in our video, as we learn more about what you do, looking at your website, your bio, it says your research interests lie at the intersection of environmental justice, group dynamics, and systems thinking. Some months back, our Vizcaya team, our Beyond Vizcaya team, had the chance to participate in a group discussion at Sant. Actually, it was an amazing conversation. And we were able to talk about some of the effects of climate change in terms of what was personally experienced. And here's a clip from that discussion where this issue of access comes up.
Nan ap fonti retourner Miami, le nou gade le gen inondasyon. Est-ce que nous remarquons que bon série de monde, parce que gen moyen par exemple, inondasyon pas tellement affecté yo, mais bon série de sol, on série de communauté, yo gen plus difficulté pour yo préparer pour inondasyon, ou bien pour yo bon kay qui pas à risque pour inondasyon affecter kay. Est-ce que sont bail que nous remarquons? Est-ce que nous t'avons dit que tout le monde gagne inondation affectée à même niveau, ou bien ce c'est le monde qui est affecté avec inondation comparé à l'autre?
Donc ça que nous capables de dire, inondation et rété inondation. Donc que vous avez moyen, que vous pas moyen ou affecté. Mais seulement, donc, il y a un bagage que nous sommes capables d'ajouter. Donc, c'est que, donc, un monde qui gagne et moyen, donc, joindre une solution plus facile.
All right, and so that was indeed a powerful clip, again connecting us back to this issue of access. So my first question for you is, what do you think it means to see this constant thread here pertaining to climate change and access?
So I think when we look at how the climate crisis is impacting us, of course we have sea level rise, we have extreme heat. So regardless of where you are based in this area, eventually you get to experience the heat that we're facing. However, how you are able to manage that heat is different. So if you have the financial means to have solar panels to reduce your electric burden, or if you're able to run your AC 24/7, of course, even though that's not necessarily mitigating a contributing factor to rising temperatures, but you don't feel directly, or you don't have to deal with extreme heat as someone who doesn't have the financial means to, being able to afford paying for high electric bills. When we look at it from a transportation perspective, if you don't have private transportation and you rely on public transportation, not all bus stops have shelters. So therefore you're exposed to the sun. And if you're standing in the middle of the day waiting for your bus, if the schedule is not reliable, then of course you're increasing your vulnerability to being affected by the fact that you're exposed to heat. And in terms of access, there are ways to protect ourselves from heat, but there are also ways to reduce our contribution to the extent of the climate crisis. But unless we're having those conversations, unless we are addressing our lived experiences, our values, and our understanding of the climate crisis, from an accessible standpoint, it becomes a challenge.
And I think you just said it well. You said unless we're having the conversations and addressing things. Where do you think we are with this awareness as a people of, tying all these together?
So in terms of awareness, I think we still have a long way to go. As Leonie mentioned, looking at language access. In the Haitian community, for example, how we talk about climate change is not necessarily the traditional language that is being used in the US. And when we had this gathering from the clip that was just replayed, what I observe is the participants were able to express the impact or what they're living every day as a result of the climate crisis, but the term climate change is not necessarily part of the vocabulary of that culture. So what that means is, unless we are trying to understand the perspective that people are bringing to the table, we're not necessarily making big strides in mitigating or identifying holistic solutions to address the climate crisis.
Well said. And we will provide an opportunity for our viewers to chime in and ask questions that they may have pertaining to this particular topic. I do have one last question that's for all of you, or whoever would like to take a stab at responding. What would you say to the person that doesn't believe that they will experience the effects of climate change? They feel that they're good, doesn't impact them in any way, shape, or form, and it won't ever impact them. What would you say to that person?
Where does that person live?
Yeah, do they live in South Florida?
I can try to answer this, but I will answer it with a question. I think the way how we approach conversations around the climate crisis should not be a cookie cutter approach. So, for example, I may ask Leonie, what do you think about climate change? Well, that's part of the conversation that she's already having with her community. So I would expect that the answer would be most likely straightforward, but if we're talking to someone who's complaining about heat but not recognizing it's an effect of the climate crisis, then my approach would not be, what do you think about climate change? But instead I would start by having conversations around extreme heat. What do you think is contributing to that? What strategies are you using or implementing at home or in your community to address or resolve, I'm using this in quotation, dealing with extreme temperatures.
Thank you for that. All right, so I think we do have some questions from our viewers that we can go ahead and take a look at. So our first question: I have a tight grocery budget. Why should I spend more on climate conscious food when that may be the difference between food for several days or food for one meal? Anyone want to attempt that response?
I think, you can start with where you are, and, these are, maybe, I think this is already done in non-climate change, like maybe health stuff where it's like, go vegetarian Mondays or whatever it is, try like a vegetarian meal a week,
Right.
I think everyone, like you were saying, wants information a different way and is on a different like place in their like sustainability journey, like climate change or wherever. Everyone's coming from a different place, so you have to really figure out where you are and what feels good to you to start making those little changes.
Okay.
If I could add to that, like for example, in my culture, I'm from Haiti, and a good portion of our meals is plant-based. Of course, if you're consuming meat, it's just a little piece of it and some meat gravy, but you know, plantain, vegetables, beans, legumes, that's part of our diet. So I think there's a cultural perspective, there's a cultural context to the conversation, and if we're looking at, you know, what are the best practice from a maybe social networking perspective, depending on how tightly knit of a community you are, depending on what kind of conversations you're having with your community, depending on how diverse your community is, there's an opportunity to exchange those ideas and practices,
Right.
which could maybe motivate someone to, you know, increasing the plant portion of their meal and then cutting back on food items that are contributing to greenhouse gases, for example.
Understood.
And you know, budget and food, you know, these are also social constructs, right? What's good food is defined within the culture. So we could have a whole other conversation about, you know, because as she says, somebody's on a tight budget. If one of my clients says I'm on a tight budget, I'm like, keep eating what you eat, because it's generally relatively healthy. If you cut the oil, it's relatively healthy. So it's not a matter, you know, if you can't afford it, you have to take care of yourself. So
Right.
I will always go to what is good food and what is, you know, it's all about how, you know, your culture. What is it within your culture?
Okay. Thank you. And I think we have another question. What would you want the greater Miami community to understand about the Haitian community?
Well, if I may, I think that it's a diverse community, that it's not a homogeneous group. And I always say, when I talk about some of the issues which affect my community, I make it very clear that it's a portion of the community. There are Haitians who are middle class, upper middle class, young, old, documented, undocumented. So again, from my perspective, from our perspective at Santla, we see what walks through the door. So when we advocate on behalf of the community, we advocate on behalf of that socio-economic group that has to deal with certain challenges. But we're certainly not speaking on behalf of the entire community, which has lots of professionals, lots of doctors, lots of engineers, lots of nurses. So I just want to stress the fact that it's a diverse community, it's a young community. We're commemorating about our 50th anniversary as a community, and we know that we have made incredible strides as we have really contributed to the Miami that we're enjoying today.
Excellent. Okay, I think we have another question. How would the community look different if we were to address these issues? We might have touched on it a little bit, so we can probably go to the next one. How do we make a case for consuming more or better seafood when the rate of toxic chemicals and microplastics is higher in those ecosystems?
That's yours.
Yeah. I actually did an interview with an awesome researcher at FIU, Dr. Jen Rehage, who's doing looking at pharmaceuticals that are found in our fish right in Biscayne Bay and down throughout the Keys, and there's certainly stuff that's getting into our waterways. And on the good side of it, there's ways that we can retrofit our wastewater treatment facilities to help remove some of that, and that's being done in some countries in Europe, so that's a good thing. But I actually was at this conference this weekend and just saw this paper looking at microplastics in oysters and farmed versus wild. And they were saying that the farmed have less microplastics, and I'm not exactly sure if it's because they're spending more time in the hatchery or they're not in the environment. I only read the abstract, but yeah, I mean, some farmed places, farmed seafoods are taking their water from really deep aquifers, for example, that are theoretically not contaminated with a lot of the stuff that's currently in the water where we, discharge stuff. So there's things that are happening across the seafood space to improve that. But yeah, it's certainly a concern.
Thank you for that. All right, so another question. All right, so I guess this could be a question for each of you. Can you go into your motivations for doing the specific work that you do? I don't know who wants to start.
I mean, we see the impact of our work. We see that we do make a difference. We see that we do get people to empower themselves, to make decisions that they were scared of making for themselves. We see children and families get along because of our work. We see the impact of our advocacy. So, and we always imagine what the community would be without our collective, because not just Santla, but Santla is part of a collective effort to improve and represent the needs of the community. And so when we think about that, when we think about folks who don't speak the language, are afraid, even when they have, we have citizens who are afraid to say anything because they think they can still be deported. And so when we don't step, as someone likes to say, in the gap for our community, we know that they're going to be impacted negatively, and particularly the children. So, and during COVID, most people, we remained open during COVID. And I know that having to go into the office every day truly motivated me to understand the impact of the pandemic on families, and really stirred us on to make changes, or to shed some light on what they were going through.
Right.
All right, I can go next. So I've been working on disaster-related issues and climate crisis for over 10 years now, and what I see every time a disaster happens is we're still facing with the same challenges. A group of the community is excluded, or the time that it takes for them to get relief or being recognized, how they are impacted, is kept at the bottom of the list, the priority list. So at the Optima Network, what we are working to do, our mission is pretty much, how do we change the conversation around dealing with disasters or managing emergencies? Is there an opportunity for us to move away from the traditional model or framework of emergency management? But how can we also create that hub or network of young scientists, researchers who are from those communities that are ignored or left behind, to be part of that conversation, while also supporting community-based organizations that are limited in terms of technical expertise, and who are clearly having a positive impact in what they are advocating for in the communities that they're representing.
Thank you.
So amazing. Yes, I think seafood and ocean health and all of that is just going to keep, there's a lot of people on this planet. I love South Florida. I think it's one of the most beautiful, special places in the entire world. It's amazing. We have the Everglades, we have our coral reefs. I hope it's can be beautiful and accessible and around for a long, long time. So that's kind of personally motivated. Like, I'm an ocean person. I'm more comfortable underwater than on land. And but yeah, I think protecting our oceans and connecting people with food, and that's going to just become more important as climate change. Like already, climate change are affecting fisheries and the seafoods, like and the fish and lobsters are moving to different places in the ocean, and so kind of figuring that out and how does that impact our access to the seafood and so yeah, I just love the ocean.
Yeah, and I just want to really thank you all for sharing and just being in the space with you, because I can definitely tell that you're passionate in what you do, each and every one of you, and just also being able to have this conversation to bring about awareness is a big deal. It's kind of what we talked about today. And so for those of you that are tuning in, we want to thank you as well for just being willing to take the time to hear and contribute with your questions. And it's not the end in terms of being able to ask questions. We do ask that you continue to interact with us, send questions our way, and we will do our best to get the response. And if you were pleased with this type of content, you want to continue to consume this type of content, we ask that you would continue to follow us on our various platforms, specifically on beyondvizcaya.org. And we hope that you would tune in on our next program. So thank you all, and thank you to our viewers. Sandy beaches and a tropical climate, one-of-a-kind ecosystem. Sandy beaches and a tropical climate, one-of-a-kind ecosystems including coral reefs and the Everglades marshes. All these describe Miami's natural environment and are just some of what makes it the unique treasure it is today. Locals and visitors from all over the world benefit from and enjoy these treasures. But sadly, an increasing population, pollution, and the impacts of climate change all pose great threats to Miami's natural wonders. This season of Beyond Vizcaya, we will explore the area's resiliency in the face of environmental challenges. We will learn more about how this impacts the people in our community through shared stories. We will take a closer look at how landscapes have been affected and hear just how technology and innovation have been used to meet the challenges the city faces. You will also have the chance to chime in on the conversation by sharing your own experiences or asking questions. Join us as we seek to learn more about how to keep our natural environment alive on this season of Beyond Vizcaya.